Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel from DPA Microphones, and I'm joined by my colleagues Jared and John, who are working behind the scenes for this DPA Facebook event. So imagine this. You're watching a sporting event without the sound. There are so many sources to manage, and when all the sources are managed properly, it still needs to sound fantastic and intelligible for the millions of viewers who will mostly only notice bad sound. That is where Fred comes into the frame. Most people have heard Fred's work, whether they are sports fans or not. In a way, he has been in all of our living rooms at one time or another. It's Fred Aldous I'm talking about from Fox Sports. A little bit about Fred, who was our guest today. Fred was born in Ogden, Utah. Fred's TV career started in 1981 at KUTV in Salt Lake City, Utah, mixing weekend newscasts, and he's also a freelance career starting in 1986. Since then, he has worked for Fox Sports, CBS, NBC Sports, ABC, ESPN, MTV, Turner Sports, Showtime, and HBO. It's a mouthful. Fred has been a freelance audio mixer for Fox Sports since its inception in 1994, and their audio consultant and senior mixer since 1998, continuing those duties through today. Fred has overseen Fox Sports' unprecedented 19-year consecutive run for Sports Emmy, Best Live Sound/Audio. An advocate and pioneer of discrete surround sound in sports helped change the way we listen to live sports audio, especially NASCAR and the NFL. Fred is currently the lead mixer on Fox Sports coverage of the NFL, mixing their every Super Bowl that Fox has aired, with the exception of the first one in February of 1997. He has garnered 27 Sports Emmy Awards over the span of his career in the categories of Best Live Sound, Technical Achievement, and Technical Team Remote. In 2015, Fred was inducted into the Sports Video Group SVG Hall of Fame. Involved also with the educational process of broadcast audio, he's been instrumental in helping to create the broadcast curriculum at the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences in Arizona, an established audio school in the Phoenix Valley. He says that if someone mentored him and gave him a chance, it's time to do the same for others. And we'll talk a little bit about the school in the second segment. So without further ado, welcome Fred to the show. Let's virtual hand clap him, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks to you. Thanks to John Root and Jared for having me and giving me the opportunity to be involved.
Well, it's our pleasure. And that was quite a mouthful to start out with. You have been involved in a lot, and you've been at this, and you've seen the industry change colors and complexion through the days. I've got a little bit of experience in your world, and it's a demanding, creative, and hardworking industry. So who gave you your first break?
Well, kind of my drummer in the long run. I was playing in a band up until the late 70s, and my drummer had called one day and said, hey, they need a mixer on weekend news at local TV station. And I had been getting more into some engineering stuff as my music career was starting to fade a little bit as I got married and felt like I needed to make money instead of burn money, being a musician. And so it was that tip that I went in and applied for a job at KUTV Channel 2 in Salt Lake City as a weekend news mixer. I knew nothing about live television. And I got hired, and boy, I'll tell you what, I just loved the rush of live television. The nice thing is when it's over, it's over. I don't have to go back, and I don't have to, recut a guitar track, a vocal track, whatever else. I'll tell you what, I was hooked, and the rush of live TV is pretty incredible.
It is. We have a similar story. I remember it. It's always a drummer who does it, right?
So, yeah, exactly.
I remember going in and mixing my first newscast. Similar story, almost exactly, and being thrown in and getting those nervous feelings of my first live newscast. And I remember the only way to wrap my head around it was to think of all the anchors and all the remotes as different members of the band. And I said, okay, Steve is the guitar player, but he's really in Newark, New Jersey, and he's a reporter, and he needs to hear only this, this, and this. So we'll give him that mix minus. And we'll give this guy this, and that's the way I wrapped my head around it. And then, like you said, fell in love with this sort of thrill of getting into it. That's crazy. It's a very similar entry story. And we know a lot of the same people, too. We'll get into that over a beer sometime.
Absolutely. I look forward to a root beer for me. Thank you.
Root beer sounds great for me, too, actually, to be quite honest. So let's talk about where we are right now. What have you been up to with all this craziness going on, and where do you see the next steps are? I know the NHL is sort of planning to roll out some live shows. Are you hearing anything that you can talk about?
Well, we have been in some discussions at Fox Sports with, hopefully bringing baseball back here fairly soon. And how do we address that without crowd, if that's indeed, the path they choose to go is, coming back and playing, for themselves on the field. How do we bring them back into the game with maybe some enhanced audio, some enhanced crowd? Same thing, moving that into the TV world. Doing quite a few tests with that right now. Not sure where we're going with that yet, but it has been kind of crazy. Usually our industry is recession proof. You look back at the recession in 2008 through 10 and that period of time. And unfortunately, as people were losing work, they were staying home and watching TV more. So in the sports world, for us, especially TV sports, ratings went up. We had some great ratings in there, some great programming in there. So we're historically recession proof and sometimes benefit from that. This was a little bit different than when this hit. So when sports actually shut down, that pretty much shut down any broadcasting of any live sports, of course. So that was different for us to have to deal with not working and not providing some sort of entertainment for the general public. And it was really different for us because, again, we're pretty recession proof when you think about it.
Yeah, yeah, and you sort of have like a memory of just sort of like a muscle memory of just going in and doing the shows. I mean, sports is a slice of our life. It's an emotional content. So whether the economy's doing well or whether it's doing bad, there's nothing like a good game to sort of take you away for a while. The same way music sort of works, a similar magic. And you said something about adding more microphones and more elements. I would imagine that if people cannot attend, that we want to bring people closer to the game right now for the immediate future. And maybe it's something that's going to stick for the way we do things in the future. But if I heard you right, did you mean sort of like getting more mics on players, bringing the game closer to someone on a computer watching it?
There definitely will be some advantages to not having crowd out there by being able to pick up some nuances that are historically buried when we are in a live environment with however many thousands of fans. NFL usually average around 72,000 fans in a stadium. Baseball anywhere between 28, 35,000 fans. The challenge with that is going to be making sure that we don't get the censors in trouble, because there's going to probably be some language that's going to come through that we've never had to deal with before. Or when we do deal with it, it's on a minimal basis. But also some of the strategies that happen between coaches and players and things like that. We've got to be cognizant of the strategies that the players and the teams are using, that we're not broadcasting that so everybody can hear that. So there are a lot of extra, there are some elements that come into play that we have to be cognizant of. I think we would all love to just hear the tight miking, and
Sure.
over the years, I think we've done a great job. Our baseball crews with Joe Carpenter and his crew that goes out and does World Series for us. They're miking bases. They're putting mics in grass. They're putting mics on the walls. I mean, they're putting mics friggin' everywhere. And there is not a lot that they miss, if anything. And I got to tell you, it really enhances it. And the thing is when you watch a regional show from one of their shows, where they don't have the luxury of time and or the equipment to accomplish that same show, you miss it when it's not there. I think our philosophy is we don't really want you to know that it's there. We want you to know when it's not there, probably more than anything. But I think more than anything, just enhancing with maybe some artificial crowd, either to the players on the field to keep some excitement going there, and TV land, the Bundesliga League. Got to have a hard time saying that. They're doing some crowd reactions with that. Some pretty minimal stuff. So we've got to get a lot of people on board with that if we're going to continue down this road. Do we enhance the players on the field with supplemental speakers and crowd out there? Do we do it in TV land only? Do we do nothing? So that we'll see what happens. I think the good news is that it's not going to be long term. I think, hopefully by next year, it may be a season long that we're doing stuff like that. But at some point in time, as we all know, life will somewhat get back to normal, and we'll get back to having full stadiums and full crowds and things of that nature.
And it's an opportunity too, right? Because whatever you learn from doing this experiment, you might say, you know what, let's keep this. This worked really well. or this was horrible, because this guy was cursing, or you
Right.
got
Absolutely.
YouTube moments, and so I think it sort of knocks us off of our repetitive perch, so to speak, and gives us a new way to bring this to the public. And then maybe when we go back, we can keep a few of those things and learn a little bit more about what we do. Because if there's anything in broadcasting that sort of gets to be a little bit crazy sometimes, is the repetitive notion of it. Like you set up, you put the truck up, you do your thing, you get 75% there. And that's actually a question I'd love to ask you is what when you get an event, like say, hey, we're doing like the World Series or we're doing this or that, what's your mile high look at this, and what are you looking at for issues and for what you definitely know you need to do and some things you're not so sure of? How do you go about that, and how many people do you have under you?
Wow, those are a lot of questions. There's a lot of content there. My goodness.
That's why they pay me the money, man.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's why you wear that DPA hat, right?
Exactly.
Where to start? The nice thing, I'm very fortunate. I'm very blessed over my career, being in the right place at the right time, having the right mentors to mentor me, and also having the will to do some of the work. I pretty much live in what I call the Crystal Palace. I pretty much get any piece of equipment that I need and or want. I have the luxury of time. I have the luxury of all the best stuff. That's not to say that I didn't come from hanging a couple of 635s out of a window for a football game, and that's pretty much mixing that to a couple of talents. So, I've been through parts of my career where I haven't always had the best equipment or enough equipment. So you learn how to make that work. And so when I have the opportunity to have that, it really is, a blessing to have that. So, the biggest thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that the viewer at home feels like they are actually at the event and they are a part of the event. My philosophy is if I see it, I want to hear it. All of our shows so far that we've done at Fox Sports are live. We don't do any enhancements to those. That's why as we move into this potential enhancing of crowds is really unique to us, because that's just not our philosophy.
Yeah, kind of weird.
We move into entertainment at that point. Do you want it to be reality or hyper reality at that point? Do you want it to be entertainment? Do you want it to be sports? So there are a lot of things that come into play when that happens. So especially for a Super Bowl, the nice thing is we have a season to work into that. We have playoffs, and then we move into the Super Bowl, and we have the luxury of time once again when we set up for a Super Bowl. The stakes are very, very high. Financial stakes are high. It is the Super Bowl, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
And it is a rush. I'll tell you, when you get into a 30 count before you go on air, before about 100, and last Super Bowl in Miami, I think we averaged 103 million viewers. In Houston 3 years ago, we had 153 million viewers, I think was the total number. So, I can't think about that. I pretty much tell people I mix for two people, Chairman Hill and my wife, and not necessarily in that order. I have to live with her, of course. But, I think it's just making sure the experience for the viewer at home is the best that it can possibly be, looking at that. My crews vary. It depends on what part of the season we're in, if it's preseason, regular season, postseason, Super Bowl. It varies anywhere from 3 to 10 people for NFL. NASCAR is back up and running again, and I did NASCAR from 2001 through 2015 and handed that off to Kevin McCluskey, and he and his group are doing a great job with that now. And they're running about 8 to 10 audio technicians on site. So it takes quite a bit to get that stuff up and running.
That's a good place to interject for a second. So let's talk about I like the fact that you're sort of starting at the end result, like the person at home, and then working your way back to that production, because that really is the target. That's the audience. And I had a funny thought too. I was thinking, when you're doing this sort of artificial audience, it would be really funny if you hit the happy applause when it really should have been the home team, or sort of like.
That probably wouldn't be too good, would it?
No, but all these people, like, if it was in my mind, I would look at this, and I did look at this when I mixed live sports as, okay, I got a whole bucket of solutions I need to do here, because I really can't be in all these places at one time. So I've got this guy doing this and this girl doing this, and sort of, can you talk a little bit about what your people are doing in the field for you, like maybe a little bit of the description, especially for some of the people on this Facebook event that are, trying to break into the industry, And before you answer that, I want to say that please email your questions into John because he's sitting there bored right now. So we need questions. Go ahead.
Can I email John some questions?
Go ahead. Let's email. That's good.
So on NFL, the last 2 years, I have been doing Thursday night football with Fox. I pretty much since 2001 have been the A show mixer for with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. And once Thursday night came on board, doing the weekly Thursday night game, and then the doubleheader Sundays, we handed off to Joe Carp when he wasn't out doing baseball. I'm finally to the age and the part of my career where I don't have to work that hard, thank God. So it's just been the two of us, mixed for Joe and Troy since then. But so my football crew on Thursday night consists of myself. I have a sub mixer, Eddie Verstrate, who I brought on board a couple of years ago. And his duty is to guide and direct the PRAB operators around the field and take care of all the field effects, the handheld cameras and all of that, because I've got so much going on with my announcers, my reporters, and all of my production elements that it's just physically impossible for me to chase all of that stuff. So it's really nice to have him there. And being an accomplished mixer himself, he takes a lot of load off of my plate with some of the setup things that he takes over for me. So he's pretty much responsible for taking care of the field sounds and making sure all of the field works properly. I'm fortunate enough to have an RFA2. So I have Matt Hooten as my RFA2. And he makes sure that all of the frequencies are coordinated. He makes sure that all the equipment works. He makes sure that there are no failures for me, within his control, obviously.
I want to keep that nice and relaxed, right?
Yeah, Hootie's great. So he's really good about crossing his T's and dotting his I's. So he takes care of all of my RF, the wireless on the PRABs, the wireless for the talent, the IFBs for the talent on the field, and he's been a very valuable asset. And then up in the announce booth, I have Ben Alltop. He's been with me forever. He takes care of the announce booth, so he makes sure that the headsets are set up properly, the IFBs, the hand mics, and he also kind of doubles as the booth concierge. So he does kind of the buff and puff for Joe and Troy, which is necessary. So his duties don't always include just audio, but making sure that talent's comfortable. Because if they're uncomfortable up there, it's just it doesn't make for a good broadcast. So yeah. I've had Ben with me for a lot of years, and he's very good at taking care of them. Then we historically hire a field A2 to set up the hardwire stuff on the field. So Hootie takes care of all the wireless stuff and kind of manages the field with a local field A2. And we get the crowd mics set up, our backup headsets, backup hand mics, and they're just there to make sure that all the communications work. So that's kind of my world in a show. The regular NFL games on Sunday, there is a sub mixer who doubles as the RFA2 to make sure the RF works and takes care of all the field effects. They hire a local field person and normally a local booth A2 to take care of the talent in the booth. So the sub mixer in their instance is very valuable because they usually set up in the booth. I have my sub mixer set up down in the truck with me. So it does a couple of things. While I'm doing a show, if anything happens in the compound that needs to be taken care of, he can take care of it in the compound for me. Also, if I happen to trip and break my wrists someplace, he can slide over into my chair and take care of the production. So it's very valuable. But I think having the submixer in the announce booth for the rest of our shows is very valuable because that's who the talent sees every week, because we have a different A2 setting up the booth each week. So when they're there, they're the familiar face. And consistency is key in this stuff, to make sure that the broadcasts get done as well as they get done.
Yeah. And I can't imagine like the behind the scenes communications alone is sort of the lifeblood, because you guys are miles apart sometimes, and actually communicating and getting that all set up through the truck so that everyone could talk to each other with ISO records to producer, director, audio guy on discrete channels is probably an amazing feat all its own.
It is. And before he kills me, Andy Rostrun and Mike Gilman have been my comms guys on Thursday night. You know what? I forgot to include those because it's the first time these last 2 years, it's the first time I've had a comms guy sitting in there with me. So if I don't mention them, I'm going to get hung. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
Andy,
they'll be like, "Hey, this channel don't work anymore. We're live." So-
Andy, what did you do?
That's great. And I would imagine, geez, an event the size of the Super Bowl or the World Series, you're having multiple trucks for different countries, different services. Or like I remember when I was working doing NASCAR for a while, there would be little trucks with foreign announcers in each truck. Are you giving them? What are you doing? How you interact with those guys? Because they're obviously not doing it themselves.
Correct. The unique thing that we've created on the Super Bowl for years and years and years is I hand off pretty much everything to a central distribution point. And so all of the international takers come to that central distribution point and they can pick off and take whatever they need, minus our announcers, of course, and some of the comm stuff. We give them producer hot mics and AD hot mics so they can hear commercial counts, so they can do their own commercials, director hot so they can hear the cuts that are going around. So if we're going to cut to something that they don't want, say one of our sideline talent, and they're going to go to theirs, they know when to do that. So we've really made it quite unique in the fact that we provide a central distribution point. We call it FATS, feed another truck something.
That's great.
So that's where all of these elements end up from the game and the studio show that's out there with us. And then whoever needs that, they come and they pick up those sources from there. And then we do have a studio show on site in their own truck that of course we interact with and we tie together. So they have all of my resources, I have all of their resources, and it's really quite phenomenal as well as it works.
So you're basically dealing with routers now. When I was mixing in the truck, it was basically you were sending a mix minus stereo patch cable of effects only to the different trucks. Now you're probably, well, are you doing Dante? Are you doing Ethernet routers or digital routers? How are you getting over there?
Well, most of the stuff is discrete stuff. We're still using MADI streams. I'm a big fan of MADI. We're using some Dante. I think we still have some challenges with Dante in the broadcast world because we're all learning that still and moving there. And being an old analog guy, my fingernails are just starting to grow back from being dragged into this digital world. I'm much more comfortable taking a patch cord from point A to point B. That's just not the case anymore. But all of the things that I distribute to the central, to FATS is over MADI stream, and then they create MADI streams and Dante streams internally there to do the distribution. So the nice thing is I don't have to worry about that. My job at the Super Bowl, once the game rolls around, is a production mixer. I'm done with technical setup. I'm done with everything else. I switch sides of my brain and I become the creative person at that point. So it's very important to make sure that everything works before we get to that point. Unfortunately, we had a Mike Pereira's mic fail as we went on the air this year with Super Bowl. And so the nice thing is we tried to work on it for a short period of time, realizing that it was dead for the rest of the show. But we had a backup headset mic to put him on. So we always make sure that we have backups. I'm running kind of a hybrid booth right now. A lot of my comms are on Dante, running MADI stuff, but also using the Hydra 2 for CalRec. We use CalRec consoles and distribution.
Yeah, beautiful console.
And pickup points there. So I kind of run a hybrid announce booth. But I'll tell you what, I still have a copper cable going up there that have backup headsets on them. So if anything happens, either to power, even though you have UPS power supplies, sometimes if they're on them, they run out of cheese. I have a piece of copper up there that has a couple of headsets on it, a couple of hand mics.
Got some POTS lines up there, do you?
Absolutely. In fact, honestly, yeah. And in fact, for those who don't know, POTS is plain old telephone system.
That's telephone. Are you still using the voice of God?
We are. We have an SA up there.
Nice. So if the communications fails, what do you do? Tell people what you do there.
Well, there's if communications fail, right now there are still cell phones, but that stuff even fails at times. We have some backups to go up there so the producer can talk to the talent if absolutely necessary. But that pretty much happens with the copper stuff that we have going up there. That's pretty much my backup is that. But we have a telephone line that leaves the announce booth. So if the truck goes up in flames, hopefully it doesn't, there's a small mixer up there with a couple of hand mics into it. Ben would hand Joan Troy a couple of hand mics. We're dialed into a phone line back to Los Angeles, and the show goes on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's
So
fantastic.
lots of backups.
It's come such a long way, especially the Espando trucks, the NEP trucks, and all those trucks. Like they're just fantastic. I remember in the old days, there was always grounding issues, and you would have to make a truck. Obviously, it's lifted from the ground. It's
Right.
on rubber, so it's very you want to be safe, but you also want to be quiet. And it seems to have gotten much better with the systems. But I remember just chasing sort of ground loops like you would like it was nobody's business. And
I could have made a career out of that. Oh, I did.
I did star grounding for a long time, actually. Let's talk a little bit about some of the uses that you were touching on with some of the DPA mics that you use. I remember, in fact, you said you used parabolics, which I fell in love with that statement because there's a lot of guys that use directional mics for parabolics, which you're not supposed to technically. But talk about that for how you're using some of those mics.
Well, what we had found over the years, and some of our philosophies have changed a little bit recently, but for years, and I've always been a big proponent of Omni microphones and parabs. And I moved to DPA 4060s and 4061s in 1998 when unfortunately my mentor, Bob Seiderman, passed away, and I was handed the consulting role at Fox Sports. And I got to tell you, it made such a difference in there to have a capsule, a high sensitive capsule that I could put in there and get that. So I've recently moved to my submixer now has moved to a cardioid pickup pattern, which does a very good job as well. We try things all the time, but my mainstay is still going to an Omni microphone. A DPA 4060, 4061 is probably one of my favorite mics to use on pretty much anything. I've put those in parabs. I use them, on lavaliers for dialogue. The other products that I use, I have a couple of 4006 microphones in an AB configuration out of my announce booth for my crowd mics. They're Omni mics. I want to pick up reflections. I want to hear things that a lot of people try to avoid. And right or wrong, it works for me. I've got a couple of pairs of 4023s that I use on the field in a little in a right coat for my crowd mics down there. So, I'm still a big fan of that. And on racing, and I'm going to move into racing a little bit now, if that's all right. This might be
that's fine.
Transition there.
Let's race.
When we first got the contract for NASCAR, we obtained the contract in 2000, and so I was given a blank sheet of paper to create what we needed to create. So I got together with myself and several other people, Dennis Ryan and some other people, and we came up with a mic plan. And the only microphone I found at the time, because we were doing a lot of cameras on the walls right next to the track where it gets anywhere between 138 and 148, 150 dB, was a DPA 4007, and we're still using those to this day around the track. They're an Omni microphone. I like hearing some of the reflection behind what's happening because that's a part of what you hear when you're out there, again, trying to put you at that particular location. But it just, man, it handled the sound pressure level. And recently, as you and I have talked about, and we're going to move into the NHRA stuff, they had some challenges at the launch pad with blown up microphones. And it's my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, once we, Mike Rakosa had come to me and asked my suggestions, and we got some 4007s out there, and I think they're pretty happy with those.
Yeah, we went out there, had a great time. Mike's a great guy, and we brought a bunch of stuff out and hung out for like 3 days actually, and tried a bunch of things and made sure that they had a really great experience. And it came back because basically the immersive product that I believe Fox was selling to the homeowner, the home viewer, every time the camera shifted from car to car, the low frequencies would shift, and when that happens, it becomes distractive to our brain.
Right.
And so the low frequency was where they needed to remain, and they were hitting like close to 165 at the start.
It's incredible.
They were blowing microphones up. I saw a lot of great expensive microphones there, all blown up. The 4007s did save the day. That low sensitivity, that wide frequency response really was the key. They actually wrote a white paper about it, and thank you for that introduction because he's a great guy.
I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah. The hardest thing about engines and the hardest thing about people clapping is they're not all doing it together. So the transient quality of a microphone needs to be super linear in the on and off axis. If you have a bunch of 20,000 people clapping, we've all heard, and the fact that you're using Omni microphones, I applaud you for that because you're reducing your proximity, you're not getting any sort of popping. It's better for the wind, it's better for all of that, and you're getting a really great image. and you are hearing everything. But when you've got that linearity to boot, you're getting, you're hearing every clap because the microphone's moving that quickly. We've all heard when the comb filtering happens and you sort of listen to an older tape and it just does not sound like people clapping anymore.
Right.
And that's that's kudos to you. That's a great choice. Any other crazy car stories that you have?
Well, I don't know about crazy car stories, things that we have to worry about in NASCAR that you usually don't have to worry about in a recording studio. We have to worry about the elements. We have to worry about wind, rain, snow at times out on a NASCAR track, but we have to deal with, those same elements in NFL as well. But the other part of NASCAR that we have to worry about is we have these 2,000-pound vehicles going about 190 miles an hour that can create problems if they crash into a mic. We've had them crash into a wall, take out cameras and microphones. We have to worry about the hot rubber that comes off of the tire that maybe land on a cable and burn through a cable, rendering it useless. So we have the elements of the event itself in NASCAR, and same thing with NHRA or any racing for that matter, that you don't have in a studio or even a ball and stick sport, as we like to call them. We put Omni microphones inside of the cars for the in-car stuff. We use fairly inexpensive disposable mics because they pretty much blow up quite a bit in there, not only from the sound pressure level, but if obviously the car is in a crash, we're going to lose equipment in there. It's just a part of life.
Yeah. It's one of those things.
So it's a crazy place to be. I mean, NASCAR is crazy. I was fortunate enough to be involved with its resurgence starting in 2001, and it reached its peak in 2006 through about 2010. So it was some fun times, and the crowds there are great. It's rare you can pick up a lot of crowd at a NASCAR track, but during those years with the crowd going, believe it or not, we could dig out and we could get some of that stuff in there, and it truly does make a difference.
Sure, to carve it, sure. It's very hard to mix that live. I want to go to a few questions because I believe we have a few, and then when we come back, I want to talk about how you use wrapping cables to relax yourself.
Okay.
And also touch on to some surround stuff. But I think John has a few questions. Johnny, go, Johnny.
I'm here. Hopefully you can hear me and see me. Hey, Fred, it's good to see you.
Hollywood.
Obviously, I'm sitting out at the Hollywood Bowl. It's a little empty right now, but we're hoping to fill that up here later this year and into next year. So a couple of questions have come in. The first one's from Marty. He actually had several questions, and you've already answered a couple of them. But one of the questions was, do you send stems from the A1, A2, or to other trucks?
The stems, I'm assuming, as the 5.1 mix is what I'm gathering that he's asking.
I would assume so.
Yeah, absolutely. My submixer on football, he gives me a stereo mix. Pretty much my surround mix is the crowd reaction because I want to put the viewer in the stands. The field of play never leaves in front of you. So my effects pretty much live in the front, left, and right sound field. And I build the 360 degrees out of my crowd mics with that. But yes, I do hand off my 5.1 mix to my international partners and distribute that as well. The nice thing about what we do is it's easy for our international partners to replace dialogue in the center channel. So we don't do any diversion with our announcers, left, center, right. Everything is center only with our announce and our dialogue. So that way, for dialogue replacement for our partners, it's easy for them just to replace that and do that. So I hope that answers Marty's question that yes, it does. And I'll touch briefly on our transmission paths from site back to Fox headquarters at Pico in Los Angeles. Is I send 16 channels of audio back to them. We have several different mixes for several different things. My primary mix obviously is my 5.1 mix. I send an international mix back. I send a dialogue replacement mix that has generic music on it without announcers. So if we play popular music, we're paying royalties on one broadcast versus every time it replays having to play royalties on that. So we do a secondary mix for that. I send back raw crowd mics. So the broadcast standards and practices people, the censors, If there's something that gets into the mix, they have something to go to versus just making it silent if there's a language that happens. And then when I have Deportes on site, I send their feeds back as well. They do their own mix on site, and we transport that back. So we have our hands full with 16 channels of transmission audio leaving the truck. We've gotten really good at that, and it works quite well for us.
Great question, great answer.
Fantastic. Got another one here. If you're open to it. Okay.
Absolutely.
So this one is from Lord Spencer. He asked, in regards to player mics that are coming now, do you see that they're going to be going into using more player mics now that we don't have fans in the audience as much, as well as how that will work with an immersive broadcast?
It's probably not necessary to actually put more player mics out, because with the lack of crowd out there, we're not going to have to compete with them to get the field sounds that we have. We do a pretty good job now of picking up sounds in baseball around the diamond and the ballpark, as well as NFL. The problem with miking players, we run into a couple of things. Is number one, strategy. Of course, we got to be careful not to disclose strategy that they're talking about and using. Plus, of course, on NFL, as soon as a big hit or something happens, chances are pretty good they're going to drop the F-bomb, and we want to protect our audiences, from that perspective as well. We do make the NFL for us. They give us a feed of a quarterback mic or the center or the guards, and they are in control of that. So they open those microphones to us on the broadcast as soon as the clap of the huddle happens. So we can come up, we get the cadence, we get the initial surge of the play, and then they take them away from us. So it's pretty much under their control. We still have to be careful about some of the language that happens. For the most part, I've been doing this long enough. I pretty much know when something's going to happen versus not happen. It's just experience. We're not always good about that. We did a game in Tennessee a couple of years ago, and I had gotten a note from our president of Fox Sports at the time, Eric Shanks, saying, "Did you guys not hear any of this? I guess the sensors bleeped us 32 times." What happens is an audio room in a broadcast truck on site is the least desirable place to listen to a mix. It is the most hostile place on the planet to listen to a mix. I'm listening to not only my mix, I'm listening to a producer hot mic, and I have to be aware of his leads and where we're going. I have to listen to a director hot mic. So he's the action guy. So when he takes a camera or rolls a tape machine or whatever else, I can follow that. I'm listening to an associate director for timings and for counts in and out of breaks, in and out of production elements. I'm talking with my lead tape guy. We talk a lot back and forth to keep each other honest, especially him keeping me honest about where things are coming from and what I need to track, what I shouldn't track. And then if there's something else going on, I'm talking with my submixer, finding out if there's anything happening there, if there's anything to be fixed. I'm talking to my A2 on the field. So I'm pretty distracted for the most part throughout a show when I have all these balls in the air. So once again, going back to the importance of making sure everything is working and set up right on our setup days, because I don't want to go into Sunday without something that I haven't checked to make sure that I can stay in production mode and be on the creative side of my brain versus the technical side of my brain. So as far as adding mics to players, I would love to do that. And there is some talk of all about that. But again, we just have to be very, very cautious about how we move into that world as far as not giving away, strategies and having language, even though, pretty much all of society and humanity knows about language, isn't necessary. I think it is still necessary to manage all of that stuff, but it's such a part of our daily lives that, it's almost sad, I guess. But
yeah, there's good F-bombs and bad F-bombs, definitely.
Exactly.
It's funny too. During commercial breaks, are you guys still sort of like throwing quick packages together?
We are. The tape room is very busy, constantly putting things together, highlight packages. We have an editor on site, Vic Gonzalez, who does a lot of our package editing. The EVS guys do their own editing and things. The thing is during commercial break, we don't go out and have a Coca-Cola and a smoke and all of that stuff. We're actually setting up the elements that we're going to come back on air with. And sometimes commercial breaks are actually, I need to pay more attention during a commercial break. Yeah. Because of the elements that we're setting up to air when we come back, to make sure that we're all on the same page and that there's nothing going to be a surprise when we come back. So there's a lot of coordination that happens during a commercial break. And if I'm lucky, I can have my submixer come in for a second if I have to run out to the Blue Lagoon real quick, the head, and get back in and relieve that coffee. But for the most part, when we're locked in, we're locked in.
Oh, that's fantastic. John, do you have one more question?
Yeah, there was another question that came in, but it's more to do with, it sounds like there's some guitar folks out there watching this broadcast, and they're interested in what you got there that either you're willing to play or loan. But if you want to talk about that beautiful Gibson sitting there behind you off your shoulder.
I'll be happy to loan it as long as you come mow my lawn. Yeah,
Forever.
That's the trade-off.
We just got a bunch of people that have just said they're willing to do that. So,
and actually talk a little bit about that guitar, and then I'm going to show them a DPA trick.
Oh, absolutely. So for my 60th birthday, I treated myself. I've been on the hunt for a Gibson L5 West Montgomery. A couple of years ago, I finally found one, and that's my baby sitting back there. It's a 2017, actually, L5 West Montgomery, spruce top, maple sides and neck, ebony neck on that. Back in the corner hanging, I've got a 66 Gibson 330 TD. That was my father-in-law's. It was found in his house before it was torn down, and I had my wife retrieve that for me. And the finish on it is cracked naturally, and it is so beautiful, and it just really looks neat with a natural crack on it, from the humidity in Florida. I had to have it the neck straightened out, and it was refretted and renutted, and it's probably one of my favorite guitars to play. I've got a 67 Gibson 335 sitting back there. That was my guitar from when I was a child, so I've held on to that. And I kind of have this syndrome called GAS. Guitar acquisition syndrome. So I have
that's good guess.
Yeah, it's good guess. I have 12 guitars that about 12 years ago I had some disposable income. I walked away from the music business for about 30 years while I worked on my sports career and my mixing career, and so I'm slowly getting back into the music scene. I've got a partner that writes music. I mix it and master it, and we produce it. And I've got some cuts in the Fox library that we do for highlight cuts. So that's kind of fun to do that, and I'm just slowly getting back into that. I majored in music in college, went off to be a rock star, and well, we know how that turned out. It didn't turn out too great. Once I met real musicians, it was like, shit, what am I doing?
Hey, do we get that shit? Hold on.
Yeah, exactly. Get the sensors involved.
That's a great story, and I'm gonna add to your story by showing everybody a cool little trick.
And I just learned this trick today too. This is an awesome trick
this guitar, I mean, is a little different than what he has there. You do have a 335, but for everybody, you can see the cracks on this guy too. But this is a 335, 1965, 12 string.
Very rare.
Pretty rare. But under here, you see, you guys can see that, I have a DPA Slim 4061 microphone with a concealer clip, so that we can hear the semi-acoustic sound and then combine it with the pickup so that we can get a really great sound, because there's nothing like playing one of these when you're not plugged into an amp, and we never can get that sound live. There's also other companies like Bumblebee and Ursa that make little connectors that we could put little DPA mics in. So a lot of trips. You use all those broadcast mics for your guitars. And we need to get you a $40.99 to try on your acoustic, your Martin.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
So that's a neat little trick, because I think a lot of times we lose a lot. When you have a nice archtop guitar that has a nice full sound on its own, that's not electronic, we lose a lot of that when we record, and that's a great trick, and I'm going to use that trick.
Yeah, there's a couple jazz guys out there using it. The beauty about that trick is that you're getting the pickup and you're getting it very direct. So there's a slight difference in timing, but it's beautiful.
Sure.
It really is so natural, especially when you got a great mic like a DPA. And to combine them together to get the dirt and the accuracy is nothing like it. The voice of the instrument comes alive. It's really, really great.
Look forward to that.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you a question. You talked about yesterday, we touched briefly on different arenas and different stadiums and different facilities. I mean, that's a big part of the sound picture, right? The shape of the place. Does it have a roof? Is it 70,000 people? So how does that make your job harder or better, or any comments on that?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. It'd be similar to going, if you're a musician out there, it sounds like we have quite a few. Yeah, going to different venues and dealing with acoustics of different venues. Different venues provide different acoustics, of course. An open air stadium, we get a much better sound because we don't have the reflection of a dome coming back down. I have great friends in Dallas, and we're dear friends. But I got to tell you, I dread going into that place to mix because everything runs around so much in there. We've been able to work out some of our challenges there with the help of them, with some of the PA levels that were going on in there, and they've been very open to helping us out with some of that. Some of the challenges I have are very, very loud PAs. They're becoming so prominent, and they're so strong and so wonderful now, that if I'm on the field and I've got several effects mics open trying to hear a single voice from a quarterback, and you've got 10,000 watts of crud pumping through the stadium, it becomes a pretty big challenge for
Sure.
us. Those challenges are enhanced, of course, when we go into domes, like the Superdome in Louisiana. It's a reverse parab, so everything that goes up must come down, and it comes down,
Yes.
and it comes down at different angles, different reflections. So dome stadiums are much more challenging to mix in than open airs. My favorite place to mix is Lambeau Field in Green Bay. And my favorite time of year to do that is in January during a playoff when it's 20 degrees below zero, because you have 72,000 sound blankets sitting in the stands. Everybody's got their big puffy coats on,
Oh,
and it's
that's fantastic.
fabulous because it absorbs all of that PA that's running around out there, and it lets me concentrate on field sounds, and we pick up some great field sounds. And the colder it is, the better, because the humidity is lack of humidity in the air, so the sounds travel better without the humidity. And then if it's snowing, it makes it even better because you have these little sound blankets falling from the sky that help absorb that PA. So we get some phenomenal sounds out of Green
I
Bay.
imagine your arrival times are much better too, because everything's
Absolutely.
moving. Yeah.
And Green Bay is still just a magical place. Everybody loves the team. Everybody's nice in Green Bay. I would, if I had my choice, I'd probably do all my shows out of Green Bay if I could. It's one of those magical places that you go to mix a show.
I heard Arrowhead is a close second.
Arrowhead's really loud. It is a magical place. It's a close second. It's open. Once again, we have some challenges with loud PAs there. Seattle is a great place to mix. They have what is called the 12th man, which is the crowd. The nice thing about that, it's not the PA that's loud, it's the crowd that's loud. So it's like a nice rhythm section. It gives me something to mix in and out of. I would much rather have a big full crowd that's rambunctious to mix in and out of versus somebody that's not into the mix at all, and it becomes kind of dry with the field sounds if you don't have that to mix in and out of. So yeah, some of those places are great to mix in and out of.
Hey, before we get to a few more questions, I wanted to ask you regarding the surround sound. I would imagine you're going discreet and you're not really, mixing anything that isn't the real signal. When you look at the picture that's going home, whether it be a baseball game or a football game, are you mixing to that picture for your surround? Obviously, I would think you would be, but tell me what plan you do to go after that sonic picture.
For the most part, what we have found over the years is if you move the sound field too much, it becomes distracting.
Yeah.
And NHRA is one of the exceptions to that. When they move you around with the cameras, the sound field changes in their Atmos mix. The overheads change, and everything changes with that. So given that sport, and that is the exception to the rule, we keep a lot of things pretty much static. If you think about it, and you're sitting in the stands at an NFL game or any football game, the field of play never leaves in front of you. So I try to put I have two styles of mixing, the viewership perspective from being in the stands and watching, and during NASCAR, we're able to give you the point of view and take you around to all of the cameras, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So during an NFL game, I will build my sound field 360 degrees in a 5.1 format, and we've been doing some testing with Atmos, and at some point in time we'll move that direction. But so that pretty much stays static, and then my field effects pretty much stay static in front of me in my left and right channels, as I had talked about earlier. Even when the director cuts around, I'll open up or have my submixer open up different camera mics to enhance that. But you really never feel like you leave that stand area because I don't want you to move around too much because of the distraction that occurs with that. So all of the natural sounds and the organic sounds from the stadium are in a 5.1 format. Absolutely, they're native 5.1. Most of our stuff, a lot of our stuff is still legacy 2-channel stuff on our playback stuff. So I do up mixing to help fill that void.
I got you.
If we're finally moving into a full 5.1 workflow at Fox, we've started that process a couple of years ago, and we're making some great progress making all of our elements native 5.1. But prior to that, a lot of it, well, everything was native 2-channel. So I still use up mixers because I still want to fill out that sound field. I don't want you to feel like if you're listening to the game itself while it's going on, you've got this nice sound field built around you. And if I go to a production element, it brings you forward, and then you go back to the field and it brings you back. It was very jarring to have that happen. So we try to fill out at least all 4 corners to make sure that it's it's palatable for the.
So if you go to one camera, for instance, you may bring that up a little bit into that mix just to get a little closer.
Oh, absolutely.
And take it away.
But it always stays in front of you as the field of play goes.
Yeah. And before we get to the question, this is something, with the dome stadiums, you've always had a problem. Are you ever asked to do height channels? And part B of that question is, would it be advantageous if you actually had microphones provided by maybe the stadium that were attached way up high so that you weren't getting so much reflection off of the dome?
That brings in different challenges, because if you think about it, usually the PA is hung from the ceiling. So the higher we get the mics, the closer we come to the stacks. And I love the JBL Vertec arrays and whatnot, but I got to tell you, they're the bane of my existence. So sometimes the higher we go, the worse it becomes. Now, there are stadiums that I will put crowd mics up high, maybe in an end zone somewhere. If it's like a single point distribution, let's take Tampa Bay, for instance, and San Francisco, everything has a single point distribution from the end zone. So they're really, really loud on one end trying to fill the other end, versus something that has a lot of speakers and smaller speakers around, to fulfill the stadium there. And those become challenges because I have to run the SPL level so bloody loud to fill the other end of the stadium. That brings in its own challenges. But in that case, I usually try to put something at the other end of the stadium to help avoid that direct hit from that single end distribution.
Get a little closer, yeah.
Absolutely. So, to have somebody else hang mic for me in the ceiling, it doesn't do a lot for me. I want things under my control. I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to that stuff, and it's worked out well for me.
Yeah, I think so. You've been to a few dances, right? So before we go to the questions, the referee mics, I know that they have control over that. You have to leave that open, right?
Yes and no.
All right, tell me about the refs. And you probably get a line feed from the house or something, or?
We do. That's one of the few things that is not in our control, which there are times I wish it were under our control, but the league has the home stadium provide the referee mic for us, and which brings in another whole set of challenges. Sometimes we lose connectivity between the house and ourselves. Sometimes if the coordination isn't done properly, there's interference. So there are a lot of things that come about with that. So yes, we do take a feed from the house with our referee microphone. I personally leave it closed until I see him get ready to turn the switch on. And instead of opening it and having him turn it on and having it obnoxious and then turning right back off so you can hear that transition, I'm pretty good about leaving it in the mix until I see him flip that switch and get it in and ease it in and ease it back out.
That's smart.
Finesse is what it's all about. I don't want you to really hear that switch on and off because it becomes pretty obnoxious.
And that's smart too, because he's going to bleed into the PA a little bit, so you'll hear the beginning of that, but softly, and then you just bring it right
Absolutely.
up.
And also, if I leave the fader open full time and let it under the control, if there's interference into the receiver, then I'm going to hear that. So, it helps in a couple of different places. Like I said, the finesse of the mix, but also if there's something unwanted that comes out of that, I don't want to hear that on the air.
It's pretty fascinating. John, let's have some questions, buddy.
Yeah, we do. Actually, we've got 2 more questions. So this is a question again from Marty. Marty's asked a number of questions. So Marty, I want to let you know.
Is that Marty Garcia by any chance?
No, it's not. Yeah, it is Marty Garcia.
Actually, Marty said to say hello. So hi. Yeah.
Hey, Marty.
Okay, well, because Marty's been asking some good questions, we're going to send Marty a DPA hat, and we'll get that off to him.
Yeah.
It says get closer right now with COVID-19. You might not want to get that close.
And I'm going to give Marty a spot right now. See that?
Okay, there you
There we
go.
go, Marty. Just for you, buddy.
You know, if I would have known this,
Marty wanted to ask you, Fred, in regards to Fox Sports talent, does the talent field reporters or the commentators receive any broadcast feeds in their IFBs other than the producers' cues?
we give all of our talent their own personalized mix, just like a monitor mixer would give to you know, to an artist of some sort. I'm very fortunate with Joe. Joe loves a lot of crowd, so I do a separate mix for all of my talent. Joe gets field effects, he gets a lot of crowd, he gets himself, he hears all the other announcers, and it's nice because I think having that type of a mix really helps him get in the game. And if it's not quite right, I can tell, and he's kind of out of his element a little bit. So I work pretty closely with all of them for their own mix. Troy's great. Troy pretty much just wants to hear what Joe's hearing, you know, and Joe loves to hear Joe. Troy loves to hear Troy. So I give each of them a little more of themselves. And then for our field reporters, I give them a mix minus. I give them a mix of everything minus any of the crowd mics or effects mics from the field because they're down in that element. And just to give, if I were to give them more of that, it would, I think, become distracting for them to hear because, you know, they want to formulate what they're going to talk about, and the clarity needs to be there for them. And another little shout out to Marty is, you know, we've got Erin with her in-ear monitors. I mean, we've used his product for years. In fact, from day one when I took over as audio consultant, we started using those on Pam Oliver and getting them to most of our announcers. So thanks, Marty. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's funny. If I ran really fast, I could probably be at his house and back here before this is over.
All right. So we have just one more question. And actually, Fred, this comes out of conversations that you and I've had over the years. And I wanted to make sure that we took a little bit of time before the end of this broadcast to mention the work that you're doing from a mentorship standpoint, what you've been doing with Crass out there in Arizona, and a lot of the young audio engineers that are going to be coming up that are going to be sitting in the seats that you and others like Joe and Dana Kirkpatrick have been sitting in for years. So why don't you share a little bit of that with us?
Absolutely. I live in Arizona, and I've driven by the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences several times throughout the last 30 years. And about 2010, there was I was introduced to one of their instructors over there, and so I went over and gave a quick little lecture. And one of my first things I asked them was, "Where's your broadcast curriculum?" And it's like, "Oh, we don't do broadcasting. We just do music and things like that." And they were starting to get into some gaming audio as well, which, oh my God, you want to talk about some intense stuff. You know, when you talk about first person, third person in game and how they coordinate all that, that just baffles me. But anyway, so they said that they didn't do that. So knowing that some of us older guys are going to age out here fairly soon, and I'm probably on one of my last legs before I hit the golf course and whatnot, is there was a dearth of people coming up behind us. You know, it can be a very grateful place to sit, and it can be a very unpleasant place to sit is in the big chair. So seeing that there was a dearth, nobody really doing a lot of broadcast teaching, you know, I had mentors in my life, especially Bob Siderman and a lot of people from CBS that helped me in my career. And when we get to this point in our careers, I think it's imperative that we help and give back. You know, I think that's what it's all about. It's one big happy family, whether in broadcasting, music, whatever else. You know, audio is so subjective, and audio makes our lives pretty much. So knowing that I had an opportunity to give back, I got with Kurt Ham, who is the administrator of the conservatory, and Robert Brock, who is their director of education there. And we came up with a broadcast curriculum over there. And so it's more of an introduction to broadcasting, because if you think about it, not a lot of people really know what goes on behind the scenes of the broadcast. You know, when I first met my wife, she thought it was one big microphone hanging out in the middle of some place that picked up everything. Little did she know we had hundreds of microphones out there, and you had to mix that stuff.
That's great.
And not only that, the comms that goes on, you know, producers talking to talent and tape rooms and everybody, and camera people hearing the director, and a lot of the door conversations going on, like I was mentioned earlier, between my lead tape operator and myself. Comms are like the nervous system of a production. If a camera guy can't hear a director, there's no shot. If a talent can't hear a producer giving them leads, there's no production. So that's huge. So one of the things that I made sure that we did is, as we built the curriculum, is we used the same equipment that we use out in the field. So we got together with Studio Technologies. They were very generous. We got together with Sennheiser, and they were very generous and helped us out with a lot of things there, and made sure that and RTS was a huge part of what we do there. And so I made sure that when the students get their laptops, they have AZ Edit on it for comms, and we use everything there that we use out in the field. So as we teach them, it's not about, we use this box here, but out in the field, you're going to use another box, and it's been very successful with that. So they go through a 3-week curriculum of broadcasting, learning about comms, learning how to program a basic intercom system, learning about headsets, learning about talkbacks, learning about just the nuances of broadcasting. And they build a 35-foot mobile unit to go out to events. So what we do is, through the generosity of NASCAR, through Fox, through NBC, through the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Phoenix Suns, there are times we will take our production truck down and do a side-by-side with them. And the mixers in town, Fred Donagoni and Bob Pockman, have been so generous with their time and giving us feeds. So the students can actually mix a broadcast. We take camera feeds, we take probably a dozen video feeds that they can see things going on, and they get to mix their own show without hurting a broadcast.
I think it actually ends up benefiting Fox and benefiting NBC. They can see these younger people in action and say, hey, you're going to have a job when you get out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's been a great, joy for me to watch somebody sitting there doing something. Then all of a sudden the light will come on. It's like, oh yeah, I got that now. And I'll tell you what a great, it's so gratifying to see that happening. The problem we have, and part of the requirement for graduation there is students have to do an internship, whether it's in live sound, whether it's in recording studios, gaming, whatever, is we still have our challenges getting interns into the broadcast world from the conservatory for a couple of different reasons. In a live sporting event, we're out on the road. There's expense that goes with that, and so travel and expenses sometimes will come into play a lot there. And we've been having some challenges trying to get some of the students in union houses, where they've got union members that are sitting there looking for work and trying to get work. And for us to bring a student in to do an internship just sometimes is a challenge to do with that. So we've run into our challenges with that. And being a private for-profit school, most networks are in association with universities, and they go on a university schedule where they do their internships over the summer only. Well, at the conservatory, they push out students every 3 weeks. So it's a cycle. It's a 36-week program, but every 3 weeks, there's a different cycle that cycles through. And so we've had some challenges getting them in because we're not a university. We are a for-profit school. But that's not to say to give up hope. I paint kind of a bleak picture. I'm a realist. The reality is it's a challenge to get there. I wish we had a way to get more students into the broadcasting world and into internships and move them in there, starting with an A2 or even a runner or a utility, and move up in through the ranks and become a mixer. I think it's very important for us to do that. So we've got everything in place to do that, but we'll get there. I haven't given up hope yet. We're still fighting.
Times are changing very rapidly, and for anybody that's watching this that wants to sort of get in touch with you or get in touch with the school, is there anything you can tell them here? Like, just go to CRAS is our website.
I believe it's cras.com or recordingaudioschool.com. Just type in your browser, CRAS or Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences.com or CRAS, and it should come up with that. So it's a great philosophy. They have a great program there. They've been in business since the 80s. They started out in New York when they moved to Arizona, and Mr. Ham acquired them, and he's been in business for a long time. So for any tech school to be in business close to 30 years, I think is pretty incredible.
Well, they're good friends at DPA too. I've been there personally once or twice, and my coworker has been there, I think, once or twice, and I've had a great time. We spent 2 days just doing rock and roll and doing broadcasting and doing film. They love our mics there, and we want to go back there and sort of help out even more. So yeah, it's a great school all the way around.
Absolutely. And if I have one thing to interject, if you're a student and an upcoming engineer, learn IT. Everything is going IT based. You know what? Become an IT engineer. And even if it doesn't work out in the music world for you, everything I look at in the want ads in the newspaper, IT engineer needed, IT engineer wanted. I would say 98% of the want ads are IT engineers. So do yourself a favor. You learn IT protocol. Everything's going to have a MAC address. Everything's going to have an IP address. Learn your IT protocol, and it's not just for music. It's for life skills.
And then get your Dante level 3 certification
Absolutely.
on top of that, and you're good to go.
Yep.
I have a question for you, but we're starting to turn down, headed towards home here. And John, did you have more questions there, or?
No, we're good right now. So thanks.
Good. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about halftime at the Super Bowl. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm listening.
Technically, I mean, it's got to be a shit show, right? So, tell us technically, briefly how you interact with that. What are the challenges? It pulls off pretty good every year, but you can tell when there's some issues. But what's your involvement in all that?
That's probably the only time during halftime I actually get to go out and have a sandwich and a drink.
Get a pee break, huh? Okay.
Half times are great for me at Super Bowls. There is a separate production group that takes care of the pre-festivities and the halftime festivities. Our dear friend Paul Sandweiss is usually the mixer on the halftime show, and his and our friends from ATK, supplement everything out on the field and everything. So what we have to make sure happens is everything comes in through us. We have to make sure our delays are in. Thank you, Janet Jackson from the Houston Super Bowl. So there are a lot of sensors going on site, and
wardrobe malfunctions.
Malfunctions or language when they decide to go rogue on us. There's and I may be wrong, but there's a 5 to 7 second delay in the production truck itself, and then Fox actually just for the halftime puts a 7-second delay in as well. So we're covered on all of that stuff. But communications once again are the biggest key, because we swing all of our cameras between 3 shows at the Super Bowl. We have the game, of course. We have our own studio show that takes our cameras, and when they're on the air, they have to hear their director, and then at the halftime show, we supplement that with our cameras as well. So we have to hear the halftime director with that. So communications is probably more important than anything during the halftime for myself and the game crew, just because they're doing their own production. We switch them straight to transmission. I monitor them in my truck just to give the camera guys their program feeds and our talent the feeds if they want to listen to that. But other than that, my halftimes at Super Bowl are pretty quiet as long as everything's done properly. We do our rehearsals during the week with the national anthem and God Bless America and player introductions, and that's all fed to us by them with our camera cuts. So I have to make sure that our feeds are proper there. But they're a great group of people to work with. I love working with Paul. I've known Paul since the mid '80s, doing Jerry Lewis telethons years ago. My goodness.
I used to do those. Oh my God.
So and Paulie's great. So he's been a dear friend for a lot of years, and he and I have a great working relationship, and I have a great working relationship with ATK. If I need, a zone turned down a little bit for a studio show pop or hit, I'll give them a call on the intercom, and they accommodate that. So we have a great working relationship, and that's what it's all about. When you get to shows that size, everybody has their specialty that they do, and none of us do it alone. And so once again, it goes back to what's our primary purpose of being there is to make sure that the viewer at home has the best experience possible. And that's where we can't let egos get in the way. And my show is more important than your show, and your show is important than my show. And it truly is a conglomeration of all of us pulling together and making sure that it all works. Kirk Pallet, ATK, and those guys are just phenomenal.
So that whole production, by the way, I mixed the Philadelphia chapter of the Jerry Lewis that was probably feeding something on your console for
probably so
five years in a row. And it was great. But that whole production truck at the halftime, the audio is physically going right to your transmission room or going through your console and then to the world?
Yes to both.
Yes,
So
yeah.
the primary transmission path goes straight to FATS, the central distribution point we talked about earlier, gets put into transmission there, then to Los Angeles, not over the air. But I also take it into our truck, again, for a couple of reasons. Number one, so I can make sure that the camera guys on their program feeds can hear what's going on, the talent can hear what's going on. And it also serves as a backup path in case anything does happen to the transmission path directly from them to the network. So we do a lot of backup paths, varying places and varying degrees, and making sure that they don't follow the same physical path, but everything comes out and around and, different places. So, we're backed up pretty good on that because the stakes, again, are so high.
That's fantastic. Well, I could talk with you forever. You're just a wealth of information, and you're a great guy, and I want to thank you for taking your time to do this. I want to thank you dearly from my heart, and thanks Jared and John working in the background. If anyone out there wants to sort of get with DPA or find out even how we're doing these transmissions through our MMA units here, which I don't know if you can see. Hold on. There's an MMA. Woo! So
there's one right here.
Yeah, we're using our mics basically that you could use in the field, but also through your iPhone or your computer. That's how we're talking right now. My email address is vga@dpamicrophones.com. Comcast plug, right? vga@dpamicrophones.com, and just reach out to me if you have any questions. Is there a way that folks can get in touch with you directly, or if they have questions?
Actually, if you want to if they want to email you and then you can forward those to me, that would be great.
That sounds great. And if anyone has any Facebook remarks after this gets viewed, just put it on there and we'll send you over any questions that come up. But again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. John, if you want to give any closing comments as well.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it. I've been a family member of DPA for a lot of years and still appreciate the opportunity to be involved. Thank you as well for having me.
Yeah, you even know one of our first, Morton, right? You're friends with Morton.
Morton Stove and I are still very good friends, one of the original owners of DPA. So shout out to Morton there. Thanks for the introduction, Morton.
Oh, you're a super user. Thank you. Well, that's it for now. Everybody out there, take care of yourself and be well. And we'll see you next time. I think we're doing a women's panel next week. Take care.
Thank you.